Okay, I was reading this. This is still in the honesty section. I was just reviewing a little bit of it before you joined. So he's talking about conventional moralists regarding honesty as a trade-off, as in one thing over another. For example, should you weigh the $1 million value of $1 million payoff against a disvalue attendant on fraud? For example, the retaliation by others, the loss of reputation, and then decide. He's saying that's basically what a conventionalist, practical, pragmatist type morality might.
Um, yeah, I mean, I would call it utilitarian, but sure, yeah,
Okay, I
that's
don't know the label,
probably
so let's
yeah,
go with utilitarian. Yeah.
because
Uh,
it's like just weighing options, which is good, which is the preferable consequence. That's
right.
all, or consequentialism, you could say.
Okay. Um, and so where I originally had trouble, and I just realized going through this again, was this bit about the calculus rests on a non-objective approach to evaluation. And I think it was just the phrasing where he talks about the con man wants it subjectively, and this approach, this conventional morality, ignores the role in evaluation of facts of reality. And this is where I got tricked. It's like, to me, there's nothing being ignored because there's not even the ability to properly think it through in this described objective way. It's like I just said, there's just an inability to think in broad principles generally. And so I can see how if you believe these principles are true, then this is that the morality itself, this conventional morality, ignores the role of evaluation of facts of reality. But a regular person who's thinking this way, to me, seems like they're just not able to think in principles, which is hard.
As part of it, I think that is another way to look at what's happening there. But let's just consider somebody weighing that option. They could say that they could um, get the values by, I don't know, trading stocks in a certain way, or you could just steal it all. I mean, you can choose those options. You can say, well, I can get $1 million, but it's to trade off what I get with, or what occurs with, or let's just say you steal $1 million.
Yeah.
Whether it's good as you're merely comparing the payoff to the fraud, like you're comparing, like you're just looking at the value in itself. So when it's saying it's intrinsically, or value is intrinsic, like you would be saying that the payoff is some value divorced of some evaluation. You're just looking like it's worth, I don't know, 10 good points or whatever you want to weigh it as. You could just say $1 million has this, whatever weight you put to it, and the fraud has another weight to it. And then you could just weigh the good in them. And you could just say, oh, the avoiding fraud is a better measure of good.
And
Or
isn't the
being
broader
honest is only with what you get. It's just looking in terms of, the person would be strictly looking in terms of merely the value of the thing itself without reference to like what good it does for your life or what end it serves. It's just merely a trade-off.
right? And isn't that though an example of, rather than dropping context, an inability to even hold the context? Because look at me, for example, how many sessions have I had with you and I'm still trying to understand why principles work? And you could hardly say I'm dishonest in my approach.
Right.
And so my take on this now, having reread it, is that when he's saying the conventional morality ignores it, it's not, I don't know if it's necessarily a statement of intention. It's just, yeah, that it's
I would
absent.
say,
And
yeah,
my
it's
take
not
on
intentional.
my take on the whole thing, with the examples you gave included, is that the inability, like, yeah, I mean, I think that way because it's too, how do you hold without being able to think in principles and know why principles work and when they work and what considerations to take into account to know when they're applicable? How could you possibly, like, you can imagine a few things at the same time, right? But beyond that, the imagination simplifies and you're like, all right, well, if I steal $1 million, I could buy a nice house. But how could you possibly project all the different things over a whole span of a life without principles? It's impossible. And I don't think.
Yeah, you would need some epistemological thing in objectivism would say, well, as principles.
Right.
A consequentialist might just, it might be similar to that. It's just, what is it that we're using to judge whether something has a value?
Right.
Are you merely comparing like the weight of two things?
Right.
Like, where is this measure of value coming from?
Right. Right. So we're saying it's non-objective in the sense that it's not as integrated as it could be, integrated into the rest of a person's life. Like what this value, like what is a value? Where do values come from? How should one live? Like all those questions aren't factored in, which by the way, are impossible to factor in without principles, but they're not, that's what is being said basically. Now I understood that part.
Yeah, or at least if you're not doing it this conventional way, like your effort should be in terms of integrating information about the value. You aren't just looking at that. There's an intrinsic value, that there's a value just in it. Like all you need to do is look at it and find
Right.
the value,
Right.
regardless of who you are. Just like, and that's not a good way of thinking. You want to think more in terms of you as a whole entity, the totality of things and what values do for your life. It's not thinking about values as a thing detached from you, but specifically in relation to you.
Could you give me an example of that description you just gave in relation to the example of even an everyday example you can think of? What would be an example of someone thinking of a small value intrinsically, and then an example of how they would then think about it in relation to their whole entity, as you put it? What would that mean?
I'm thinking of, well, you could think of something like, should you spend time with your mother who you have a strained relationship with? Like, let's say that's just something more everyday that you might have this feeling you don't want to go, but maybe you should, you're not sure. And you
Yeah.
might just measure things like, oh, family has a certain value, like she's my mother, therefore just by being my mother,
Right.
she serves some value for me. Just, I don't know, she's more important than the friend I want to hang out with this weekend.
Yeah.
Or my mother wants to ask me, so just based on that, I might say my mother's worth more. But then you could think of just the consequences. Oh, what will happen if I don't go? Will she just get mad at me? Or is there something about my friend that makes them inherently more important? It wouldn't be thinking in terms of what does it mean for my life if I hang out
Okay.
with my mother versus my friend? What would
Right.
it mean not just for what is the value of a mother, but what is the value of my mother to me?
Right.
That's more of the relational thing. We're trying to relate it to yourself.
Hey, that's interesting. There's probably a lot to explore there later, because I can see how you may automate one way of thinking where you often don't take things into consideration in relation to you, but just as sort of absolute things, like that is good or that is bad, or one should do this, but it's not that there's no relationship to you and what you actually feel or value.
Yeah. So
Okay.
that's more what intrinsic would mean here.
Right.
Not that you aren't even thinking, but that to the extent you are thinking, you're doing it like some absolute way, or some way that's just, there's an absolute answer to this. Like a mother has a certain value and that's that. Doesn't matter what you think or feel. That would be intrinsic.
Okay.
Yes, this is what I'm saying. No reference to a standard, or in this case, your life as a standard. No, if no reference to that, then it's like, it's saying don't even use that.
Right. The next question is just a repeat of like that. There's a theme to the question, so we can skip it, which is my issue in understanding, like, how do I know principles always apply and they always work, even if you get away with with something. For example, because I said something about, how do I know there's no way to objectively weigh decisions in theft. But so there's definitely more
Yeah.
like objectivity, understanding that, and then also just principles so we can.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can see that, oh, it'd be great if this is true, but how do I know I really could do it? I mean, you can agree that this is maybe the right way to do it, but you're kind of more asking, how do we actually manage this? Is it
Sorry,
possible to do?
in
Like
relation to?
your difficulty is more, how do you implement this rather than is it true? Like you're more thinking like, yeah, it's nice that it would be true. Or
Yeah,
maybe it's nice that you can get here, but what if I can't get there? Or what if some people can't? Or what if we don't
yeah,
have the capacity to do so?
yeah. It's like it would be nice. I would like to get there, but I'm not clear on, does it actually work and is it true? Meaning it's true. I can see it's true some of the time, but I'm not clear on like why, for example, theft is completely ineffective, or why there aren't exceptions that someone can come up with rules for theft. But
Yeah,
that is that the issue here is deeper than just, I think, this specific principle of honesty, for
yeah,
example. So
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, which, by the way, where do you think, like, if we had to identify the roots of the problem, of my problem of like conceptualizing this, where would you guess they would be? If I'm asking a question like this, how do I know that there are no objective ways to weigh decisions in theft? What there's like something that's not right, but I don't know what is it. Objectivity?
Um, I think it's more related to, and I'm not even saying specifically you necessarily. It's just a way, a common thing. It's like a belief or a feeling that the objective answer, you need to come across it at all angles and come across and disprove all hesitations before you get the answer. And that's a hard thing to overcome sometimes, or even think about, because if you're told contextual knowledge is appropriate, but you've been working all along that you need as much knowledge as possible before you even say anything is true, you're going to have a conflict because there's different standards of truth going on here. And that's kind of where a conflict would appear. Like either one or one or both are false. So one of the two ways are wrong, if not both. But it's that kind of feeling, I think, when you come from an approach that you need to check it up from all angles before you say something.
Hmm. What would you
Or
say then? What is that? Is that skepticism? I'm definitely like that, because I won't believe something, because it's hard to. That's
form of
why I asked you
skepticism.
about all men are mortal is easy, like, because I can go, all right, that's true, but any other generalization is impossible. Like, how do I know? It's like
It's a form of skepticism of some kind.
but I don't know. So then, what's the solution?
Sometimes it's looking at other skeptical thinkers. Sometimes I think to know at least you can observe them doing it, and you could almost see yourself from the outside. That can help sometimes.
Hume. You mentioned
Yeah,
Hume.
yeah. Or maybe when you see Socrates, you can. I think you see yourself in him sometimes, and maybe in ways you never really thought before, because now you're seeing somebody else do the same thing.
Yeah.
I think that can
Yeah.
help too, just for self-awareness.
Yeah. I guess so. Although that would make you self-aware, but it still wouldn't convince you of
Yes.
the efficacy of this kind of just
Yes.
going with
I
certain
mean,
broad statements.
I guess it's almost looking at how other people overcome it. I mean, that's more of a practical way of dealing with it. I mean, some of that would be just reading more of an opposing viewpoint. But I think sometimes that just brings you to more questions without really answering something or giving you a satisfactory answer to really get you to change your mind. I think a lot of it's to do with how could you change that behavior?
Well, I mean, I guess the question would be actually, how can you, wouldn't it just reduce to how do you learn to think and validate knowledge
I
in a
think
sense?
ultimately that's all it is, and at least trying it out sometimes. Because if you're skeptical enough, you're not going to even try. If I'm imagining like the most skeptical person in the universe, that they don't even want to believe that you can be certain of anything ever at any point, then I don't think there's anything you could even say to them. I think at some point they just
Well,
need.
that's true. But the difference is you in the case of someone who's like, yeah, I can't deny that existence exists and that things have a nature. Like that's, if you've got that as a starting point,
Yeah,
then that would be different from someone who's like, well, how do you really know existence exists? That would be completely different.
um, yeah. So that's why I think self-awareness is good, because then you could evaluate your own thinking without being in your own head. I think that's a big thing. Even if you're even inclined to agree with them, sometimes it gives you just a moment to think, and opposing viewpoints at the same time can help you at least. Because if you're still interested in the truth, I think over time you'll tend to change it. And that's kind of why I mean that self-awareness is good, but also um, just consuming more and more. I think gradually it just becomes to you just notice things more.
What do you mean if you're interested in the truth, you'll tend to, did you say chase it or change it?
Change, or if you're interested in the truth, you'll pursue it,
Oh, okay, got it. Right.
or at least you'll at some point be willing to change your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess you also need, I think there is definitely that element of you need examples uh, to see a lot of examples, I think,
At some
that would
point, you
help.
just need to live it too. You just need to experience it in a direct way. I mean,
Right.
yeah, it's nice just to have these abstract principles, but we still need to actually live our life and validate it concretely, even that there's
Right.
something to. And there's many ways to do that depending on the subject. I mean, creating things, writing philosophy, making art. I mean, those are ways to bring out something real about your philosophy and not just say these arguments that we create.
Right. Okay. Hmm. Maybe we'll need to revisit that. Okay. Let's see what else. Yeah, see, this is what I want. I want this. We've mentioned this. This is why I'm trying to work so hard. Is like he's talking here about there is no trade-off to consider, no calculus to perform. And he's talking about, would anyone debate cutting off his head in order to acquire for himself $1 million? Would he weigh the gain against the loss? Or would he say, nothing can be a gain to me if its condition is that kind of loss? The same applies to subverting one's mind. There is no principle that is that concrete for me, apart from, men are mortal. And I think it's pretty cool. I can see how amazing. Anyway, I just read that and I was like, that is amazing because, if there are true principles and I validate them and I can hold them like that, you're a different person, right? But
I would think so. Yeah, I can think of the person who says like they'll fight against some evil because they say, "I don't live my life on my knees," or something like that.
right.
It's not just a statement; it's like a visualization. If you say something like that,
Yeah, and it
that's
has
just
that motive force too, which I don't have
yes.
any principles like that, I think.
Yeah.
Um, is
It's
there anything that's concrete for you?
no, I think it can show up sometimes, depending on the situation. Like if I'm faced with a certain choice or a decision, they could show up. But in day to day, not so much. Like it doesn't
Wow.
need to show up so much. Like I don't need to have that feeling of I must resist this. Like I try to avoid those situations where I need to make these put myself into such a situation.
Well, that would be one side of it, but I could imagine that there might be a principle where you'd be motivated by an intense love too, maybe to do
Yes.
something, to do
Yeah.
something as well. But I don't have, anyway, I don't, how do you even get to that point? That's the question. Like, what, just keep reading philosophy, try to concretize, read art. Um, but anyway, I don't know, because we've probably
Yeah.
discussed
I
that many
mean,
times already, but that's a goal. I'm actually going to copy that and put that down on my little list of, I showed you that list of goals like that, get to that point.
yeah, I would say that's something more fundamentally Aristotelian. Like this, even like objectivism, this is Aristotelian style ethics. Like you're making it part of your actions, you're making it part of your life, and it takes time and training and cultivation to get there. It could take years, is kind of the point. Like you've got to cultivate it. It takes a while, and there's no other shortcut to it. Is kind of the Aristotelian way.
So what you're saying is that we need to do tutorials every day for years.
In a way, but that's almost like living your life in a way that these things are always in around you or around or need to be grappled with. Like I
Yeah,
would say that these questions show up in my life every day somehow.
for me too, but I don't have I'm starting to see how, like,
Yeah.
when yesterday I was like deciding between all these different things and I didn't know what to do. And I was paralyzed by uh, indecision. And I realized it's because I don't have a principle to guide the choice. It's all just arbitrary feelings. And I don't have necessarily a concretized, emotionally powerful purpose. And so then how can you decide? It makes sense. You'll be paralyzed. You can't. You just go by whim.
At
And
some level, yeah,
and
unfortunately.
but then and I also started seeing how like uh the implicit principle of live by reason or emotion can be always present when you're not clear on, you've got these choices and you don't know which one you want or which to go to, and you've got no, you're left drifting versus if you, and this is an everyday thing, versus if you were clear and like imagine project acting a certain way that is rationally and not rational. I don't want to put that out because it's too abstract, but that is proven, like acting on certain principles that are proven to get you closer to fulfillment and doing that for like 10 years. That's huge if you can do that. So I can
Yeah.
see it is every day.
Yeah. I mean, that's just the reality of it. It takes that much time
Right.
because there's a lot of, and even just trying things out, like to some extent, you're going to make mistakes on your principles. It's going to happen, but it's not like a failure of your existence. It's like that's kind of the point. You're trying to improve your thinking over time. It's not an instant on off thing. It's you gradually build it up. And you can't be worried about making mistakes sometimes. Or say like if you stuck, well, sometimes you just gotta do your best there and just go for it. It might not be, you might be missing something. You might realize, oh, maybe there's too much emotion here, but you would still recognize that your emotions are meant to help you make these decisions. And sometimes you need to just try out picking out which aspect of the emotion is important there. And that might be challenging, but that's kind of where you start. And just try out the decision, try out with what you know, and go from there. See if you can develop some of your own principles, even to an extent that you're like certain things in your life, you have to create your own principles sometimes, just maybe in something regarding work or a relationship or some things that you deal with on a day to day in your world, maybe what you um,
Right.
or whatever it is that you do on your own time. You could reason with little things to begin with. Just yeah, it's a lot of
What
work.
what would it what so Aristotle's second nature is that that's habit, right? He's getting at the same concept of habit.
I don't recognize that concept, or maybe I know it by another term.
Oh, I thought that was what you were talking about, because I remember you mentioned Aristotle saying making something a part of you. And I
Yes.
remember second nature. I'll see if I can find it. Anyway, if you're not sure, that's okay. Well, maybe it's
Yeah, I
not
don't
the.
recognize that term.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's all about me habituating these things,
Right.
making it natural.
First,
And
you see that they're true, and then you habituate.
yeah,
So it may be the case that I concretize as much as I can, and whatever I feel, whatever I both think and feel, start to no, whatever I have, I'm sure is true. I at least act on that one thing, and that's a beginning. And then from there, you just
yeah,
keep trying to concretize more.
yeah, and acknowledge when you're acting on incomplete knowledge, and just realize that sometimes you got to make a decision there or not. Forge yourself that perfect understanding at all moments before you act.
Right. Okay.
Because you don't want to paralyze yourself by thinking, oh, I got to do the ideal before I think. Well, sometimes getting to the ideal even requires just trying it, just acting and learning what happens.
Right. Wait, do you mean doing things even though you're not sure they're true?
Sometimes, like, you could feel comfortable but not certain. Like, there's plenty of times I've done something maybe that I wasn't sure. I still had doubts, but I just did what I could. I didn't
Yeah.
demand myself to study longer and study more. I didn't have the time, or I didn't need to obsess over that. If I still had a life to live, I couldn't spend like 5 hours on one little question. At some point,
Yeah.
you gotta weigh your values and acknowledge your values, and don't make yourself stuck, but think that there's a purpose to it. You're thinking in order to improve your life. You're not thinking just because you have to get the right answer. You're thinking because it serves your life and adds to your flourishing and all that.
It's back to that example you gave of that being value driven as opposed to whatever the other example is.
Or besides being rule driven, it's not about rules, it's about the goals.
Yeah. I definitely have a bit of the latter. I guess that's a religious schooling.
Probably.
Let's see. He's saying what I said before. So in epistemology, irrational mental processes detach a conclusion from the realm of cognition. So in ethics, irrational action detaches a goal from the realm of evaluation. That part isn't as clear to me, but I get this part where he says, once the guidance of principle is dropped, there is no rational method of evaluating an object. If you don't have broad fundamental principles. And when he's saying irrational action detaches from a goal, detaches a goal from the realm of evaluation, he just means there's no rational way to evaluate. Like, it's just feeling.
No rational way, or at least that's the logical conclusion. I mean, there's plenty of people who might argue, it's like, no, it's not subjective. We have a real way of measuring this. But Peikoff is saying is that ultimately it reduces to just a subjective whim or feeling.
Right. You can see my questions keep coming back to theft and murder. And like, why can't there be rational principles for theft and murder? That's something that I will need to figure out at some point. We can skip it. And what was this thing? I'm not sure. I was reading that I think I read some of Ayn Rand's Q&A last night, and she was talking about Kira stealing bread or stealing something, or no, someone asked her about, if you had to, they gave her one of those lifeboat questions, like if you had to murder 10 people, or if you had to murder someone to save your loved one or whatever, would you do it? Something like that. And she said that morality only, like the whole concept, morality as a science only applies in a certain context. And under a dictatorship, she said something like morality ends where a gun begins.
Yeah.
And so morality doesn't apply. But don't we to some extent live in societies where we are forced? There's like, right now, look at it now, like you are forced, there's so many things you're forced to do. And if you earn money, a lot of it is taken from you by force. It's not like your choice who you give it to. If you can sometimes spend half your time working for the government in Australia. So like, does morality how does that work in those contexts where it's not really, it's not a full dictatorship, but there is a lot of force already. And so if morality ends where a gun begins, how does one, like, do you know is there anything about that? Because yeah.
It's a difficult topic because I think she wrote so little on that. It's hard to infer what she means. But I have some answers for that. Well, one, a dictatorship, when she says that, she's referring to a very specific kind of control over your life, not merely the presence of force, but she's usually referring to the nature of the government beyond just the use of words, like things. It might include propaganda and widespread. I forget her actual criteria to make something a dictatorship, but I think the important point is that it goes to such a degree of destruction that morality couldn't really apply anymore. At least that's what I understand her saying, that there's a level of destruction something could face that would even obliterate morality. And that's why you could even condemn totalitarianism to the degree you can, because it even obliterates the notion of what is life.
Right.
I mean, that's a complex argument to get into why I think that, but I think that's her general point, that there's a severity to it that not only makes it hard to you can't make a decision, like you can't be morally blameworthy, but that morality just doesn't even make sense anymore. Like you can't even refer to life if the dictatorship is so bad that like life isn't even, it's like you're not even living on earth anymore, is kind of the degree of bad or the degree of difference it is from our everyday life that we would expect.
Yeah.
And also she could be referring to things like if you were forced to do something, like somebody grabbed a gun or it said that you got to do this, be it to murder your loved one, otherwise you get killed. I mean, that kind of question is, would you be morally blameworthy in that case if somebody's been forcing you to act a certain way? If you really do mean force, are you morally culpable? Or say that somebody grabbed your arm and used that to stab somebody. It's not like you've been forced to do it. Or maybe somebody just in the same way, like if somebody forces you to kill someone, are you really morally blameworthy? Is morality the concern here for you if you've been forced to do it? You have no volition there, so in what sense are you morally blameworthy?
Right.
So in a way, she might be saying that dictatorship eliminates the efficacy of our volition or something like that, so that morality isn't really the question anymore. You're completely out of the context of living life or where we derive moral principles.
Right. Okay. Okay, lying is absolutely wrong under a certain condition. This is the exception. If and when a man's dishonesty becomes a weapon that kidnappers or other wielders of force can use to harm him, then the normal context is reversed. His virtue okay, would become a means to serving the ends of evil. So this is where I wasn't too clear on it. Like, I get honesty is faking reality, but then why the man who tells a lie in this context is not endorsing an anti-reality principle. He is, on the contrary, is now representative of the good and true. The kidnapper is the one at war with reality, with the requirements of man's life. So I still see it as you're faking reality, but you're doing it to protect yourself. That's what I wasn't clear on. Like, I agree, obviously, you wouldn't ever want to tell the truth for the sake of telling the truth to damage yourself. But I still, the way I'm conceptualizing this is that, yeah, you're faking reality to this person, but he doesn't. Of course, that's how I see it. I'm not really able to see this perspective of now you're not on the anti-reality principle and that you're yeah, I'm just not clear. I'm not really following this. The way he's abstractly explained it. Like, I get that honesty as a principle shouldn't be a weapon against yourself, but I didn't get his explanation for, like, you not faking reality anymore when there's a kidnapper.
Well, I'll start at the part where he says, wielders of force can use to harm him. Honesty becomes a weapon, and his virtues becomes a means of serving the ends of evil.
Right.
But let's just go by the intentions of the person initiating these actions, the person beginning this chain of actions. Say somebody knocks at your door, serial killer. So, like, is so and so here? I want to kill them. So we can consider that case the kidnapper, and the means to that end, the means to commit that action, the means to commit murder is by using your honesty. That your honesty is the means in which they can find out, or is a means in which they can find out how to accomplish their goal to murder her.
Right.
So in that sense, we can say that it's not your virtue is the weapon. You wouldn't really call that a virtue if you're telling it, because you're giving into, or you're allowing evil to accomplish its ends. I would say that the more important point here is that you're recognizing who these people are first, and it's not that you can present fake facts, but I don't think that's the same as faking reality. I think faking reality is usually to convey that you want to see reality as something other than it is, not that you get somebody else to do it. That's not the problem per se.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I mean, you gotta find the way that will serve best your life, or even the life of your values. Like, because I mean, you care about this person presumably, so you want to protect them. You don't want them to come to deliberate harm. You want to protect your values in some way. So we want to use our virtue in the sense that we have to identify maybe threats that are in front of us. We have to identify what is the means to protect or defend our values, or what would be the means to destroy our values. So in a way, telling where the person you're defending is just telling right away would be like, oh, come on and come kill them. I'm granting you the ability to do it. I'm allowing you to accomplish your end and goal. I'm giving you information that would help you.
Okay. Yeah, I think I got lost on once you get into the anti-reality, faking reality, but you're saying it's primarily a concern with your own view of reality. So you're not faking reality. I don't know. That's confusing because a thief knows what he's saying is not true. But
you have to understand who that person is, not just. I mean, you have to be identifying also that they mean to commit an act of evil, that they mean to destroy a value, not just that. Oh, they're they're mistaken or you want to prevent them from doing something stupid. You're not just doing that, you're actually deliberately preventing them from committing an evil because they intend to cause an evil. Does that help?
So then, yeah, I mean, I agree with that, Pit. I was kind of lost on that when he's explained it in this abstract way. What about if someone asks you a private question and you don't have anything to gain from them, then you're okay to lie in that case? Is that what is going on here?
I say no. I've seen Peikoff argue that yes, it's okay.
Oh, okay.
I actually
Alright.
have a problem with his answer on that. I think Peikoff sees it a bit differently than me. Yeah, I've heard him talk about white lies. He doesn't have a problem with white lies. I do. I think because they aren't necessarily intending to destroy values with this information, I'm going to tell them the truth. I don't see a reason to lie or avoid it. I think it would be faking reality and to myself and to tell the white lie. And I might say something, oh, I want to keep it private, or I don't want to tell you. That's fine. It's not lying. But white lies, as in like saying the opposite was true because it's not that big a deal, or that the damage won't be big, or you're trying to prevent a overreaction or something. So you just lie. I think that's different. I mean, that's
Yeah,
not appropriate.
could also be a habit, as in,
Yeah.
Once you start doing something, like you act in certain ways that are habitual, like lying.
Yeah.
Like what is it, kleptomania, where people who just
Yeah.
keep stealing.
Yeah. I do have issue when Peikoff says like faking reality. I don't think it's the most accurate phrase because I mean, you can create something fake about reality. Faking to me just means, well, I would rather phrase it as denying or avoiding facts of reality. You're not or avoiding the facts of reality is more like it, I would say.
Yeah.
Like if you're lying to a kidnapper, well, you're honest about who you're dealing with. You're not just saying, oh, everybody's the same, or
Right.
I'm not going to admit that people can intend to do evil things.
Okay.
That's how I understand it. Or that's how I apply honesty myself. It might actually diverge from Peikoff.
We can skip this. This is just application of. Okay. Justice. Yeah. Out of curiosity, do you know someone who I usually try not to blame just because I think you've brought this up. It's too easy to think like people can make mistakes about a lot of things. I don't know if it's necessarily I actually think it's probably not from a place of evil. It's just literally they're not able to think properly about certain things because I've made a lot of really dumb mistakes. And so I don't generally blame, but he talks about a person who never praises and never blames. Do you know? I don't know of anything like that. Is there a person who never played? I'm like someone who doesn't really blame that much. Like I don't make any sort of accusations about if someone does something bad. I'm like, they did something bad. They'll probably do it again. I don't really know who they are or why they're doing it. I don't know anything about whether they're good or evil. I just don't really want anything to do with them right now. So that's my approach. But so I don't blame. But yeah, what's this thing about never praising and never blaming?
Um,
And what are your thoughts on also that approach of not blaming either, like I do?
my tendency, if I make an error, even if I make an error, my tendency is to overblame rather than avoid the blame. I've had to learn how to not blame so quickly. That's what I've had to learn. And you seem to be had to learn more how to. You need to learn how to judge. It's like, or if you've ever made a mistake, it's because you haven't judged harsh enough, or haven't judged enough for that
Wait,
sort of
wait,
thing.
wait. Explain that bit again. I didn't understand. So yeah. Sorry, I didn't follow.
I have a tendency to overblame, to blame
What's
too
that?
much. Just the opposite of what you do.
Oh, as in like if someone does something bad, you think they're like the content of their character is a certain kind of thing.
Yeah, or some negative judgment usually, or what
Like,
people mean judgmental. I'm a bit judgmental when
oh,
people
okay,
commonly say that. Like I'm not fairly judging them. That's my tendency.
okay.
But as far as the person who neither judges, neither praises nor judges, I'm trying to think of an example. Um, I guess I've heard of certain parents that don't seem, well, no, I'm thinking parents that judge when you do something wrong, but don't praise. I'm trying to think of an example of somebody who neither praises nor judges. It's hard to think of an example where somebody's without blame, um, that doesn't blame anybody for anything to any extent or even congratulate.
Well, yeah,
Um,
I guess it depends what we mean by blame, because maybe we mean different. Because I was just thinking, I can blame someone in the sense of, um, that person did that and they're responsible. But I just meant without yet forming, like I don't like him. I can say that or whatever, but it's not a full view of their, like, what's it called, character. It's just don't deal with that person. That they do that badly. I don't know why, but that's it.
um, yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm just trying to give the more extreme of like never even going to that full context that you're saying.
Oh, okay,
Like you're
right.
saying if you had enough information, you would, and I'm saying that now I recognize when I don't have enough information to make a judgment. But we're talking about somebody who they're not even saying you could get enough information. It's just like they're not going to judge at any point. So it's
Right.
because like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
that's is what it is. It's not who am I to judge or something like that. But that would also mean we're trying to talk about something neither praises nor blames.
I
So I mean,
suppose
your
that's an
people,
extreme, right? For
yeah.
illustration purposes again, so it would be hard for us to, yeah,
Um, Probably a nihilist, maybe the closest thing that I
right.
can think is somebody who doesn't care either way, wouldn't neither praise nor blame. They're not going to blame you for doing wrong because there's no such thing as wrong, even. There's no such thing as bad. And they won't praise you either because there's no such thing as good or
Yeah,
doing the right thing or any of that. It's just empty.
right. Hmm.
That's the only example I can think of. Other than that, I usually think of people that can recognize or at least um, think that judging is possible. They just vary in how soon they do it. But this person's like they don't even do anything. They ignore it entirely.
Yeah, yeah. Suppose that this whole section, I actually understand the need for justice. That's one.
Yeah.
It is essentially, it just means judging a character and the role they will play in your life.
Yes.
Although I,
Or people get what they deserve, both positive and negative. Or people ought to
um,
get what they deserve.
yeah, if you want the right people in your life, then you need to treat them in the way they deserve. Yes,
Yes.
that I agree with. Although even reading through, so once I read through this section, it's still, to me, in my mind, not impossible, but just it doesn't make me a better judge of character. I still don't know
It
what. So
doesn't.
what are the principles? Okay, I agree that justice is a principle. That is the evaluation of people in your life, the role they play, who they are as people. But it's still. Oh, actually, maybe one thing I took away is that if I have objective principles, then I can judge people in relation to those objective principles. So that's a takeaway. And you're clear
Um,
on those principles. For example, if you ask someone questions about when they talk about something, and you ask them, "What do you mean by that? Could you give me examples?" And they get angry all the time, and they'll never explain anything to you. Well, you could maybe judge that against. Um, honesty or independence. But how you weigh all that up is another question. But at least if you have the explicit principles, you have some way by which to reference certain behavior. So in that sense, maybe it helps. But
yeah, I agree that there isn't much there to say how to do it or what to use to judge a
yeah,
person. I could think of a handful of things though, if you want me just to mention some of them. They
yes,
might not be in this chapter, but say, well, one thing that they don't maybe mention, but I think is I forget sometimes or used to not emphasize enough is that justice includes like praising people, that if somebody deserves something good, you should give it to them. It's not just about the negativity. It's about making sure, encouraging something value positive. Another thing might be um, evaluate the person in the context of their beliefs, not on what they look like or anything like that. Like judge them based on their thinking, not about their appearance or their look or whatever it might be.
right.
I mean, anti-racism in the way you could think of like against collectivism really is a more important point. Not
Pro
thinking of people
reason.
as pro reason, like individuals think, not
Yeah,
groups.
right.
So that's the way to judge them. You don't just go based on some association you have with them.
Yeah,
Or just like say they're dealing with a group of people that you think are bad. What does that say about that person? Well, it could mean they're mistaken or they're lost or whatever it is, but you have to judge that individual for their evil, not the whole vice, not
right,
based on what the group does or what they do. So
right,
that's part of justice.
right.
And
There's probably a lot of room for finding ways to encourage people, and then encourage the good, and exploring that in detail and what that looks like, because there's not much of that actually.
I've seen examples like maybe a closest thing I could think of to like really actually a method of doing it. Like, yeah, you can acknowledge that, yeah, say somebody in the member of a KKK might be lost in their thinking and they could change their mind eventually. But how do you actually get them to change their mind? Like, what reason do we have to say that they will ever change who they are? I mean, maybe they are stuck in their collective mindset. So, and there's this guy I know of, he interviewed KKK members and he's a black man himself. And he would talk to some KKK members, like really people in the Klan, wear the cape and all that stuff, like true believers in the KKK. And he would talk to them over time. And he would, by getting to know him, they would see that, like, well, you're not that bad of a guy. Why should I think all black people are? Like, you're a great guy yourself. Like, or seeing something about him, they see that he's not maybe what their assumptions were about black people. And that this association over time, by being with them, talking to them, not forcing them to change their mind, but enough respect that at least his life wasn't in danger. I mean, early on, he felt endangered by being in front of the guy in the KKK. But over time, the black guy talked to the KKK member and like just had exchanges once in a while. And after several years, he abandoned the KKK and got rid of his cape and all that. And that took
Right,
years to change his mind. But the idea here being if justice, if you treat somebody as they deserve, it can be really tricky to do it. And things that we think might be impossible are actually, if we give people the chance to think, they could. That's more what they deserve sometimes. You need to give them the chance to think better or give them the chance to change their mind.